the best part about agriculture is that everybody is your audience because everybody eats. And the worst part about agriculture is everybody is your audience because everybody eats. And very similar with beef, it's a very polarizing item. People love it or they think that you're ruining the world. And so both of those kinds of conversations I always found fun to engage in.
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast, your weekly therapy session for the chaotic world of project management, transforming daily frustrations into real action. Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, and joined today by my guest, Kim Rounds. Now, Kim has quite the interesting profession and background. She specializes as a social media expert in agriculture. So, Kim, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I always joke that's my favorite part of my job and the part of my job that I don't get paid for. By trade, I'm a talent acquisition manager for Five Rivers Cattle Feeding, which is the world's largest cattle feeder. I've been here about 8 years, and when I first started here, I told them, I'm like, you guys are the biggest cattle feeder in the world, and you guys don't have a social media presence. Is that concerning to you guys? Because I feel like if you aren't telling your story, somebody else is going to, and you aren't going to like the narrative. And so they said, that's so kind of you to volunteer to run our social media. Absolutely.
Isn't that the way it
Uh,
always works, though?
yeah, yeah. So I kind of fell into that one, but I love it, and they're great. They've worked on compensating me, but I always joke like that's not my job. It's my favorite part of my job, but yeah, it's it's fun. I get to talk about the world's largest cattle feeder and agriculture in all sectors, but also kind of get to throw some of my personality in there.
Yeah, I mean, I wore as close to a flannel shirt as I own for this interview just because, I, I live in Kentucky. I live in horse country, but I live in the city, so it's not like I get to see the rural part that much.
Yeah, I can really I'm a horse girl at heart, and I'm in my corporate job up here on the fourth floor. We just had to wait for the smoke alarm test to go off. So I feel a little bit like an imposter some days because I go to my corporate job at my cute little office in my high-rise building, but still trying to make sure I'm plugged into agriculture.
Yeah, when I lived in Nashville for about 6 years, I said when I got there I needed to buy a pair of cowboy boots and a Stetson, and never did because I didn't want to buy it on Broadway at one of those stores where it's like buy two pairs of boots, get the third free, and all three will last for about a month.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll be bleeding by the time you get home.
Yeah, yeah. And the Stetson, well, it just doesn't look good on me. Sorry.
Well, no, I think anybody can pull off a cowboy hat. You just need the right shape. My friend Cass and I have this talk all the time.
And the right shirt and jeans and everything else to go with it.
Yeah, no, just a full $1,000 wardrobe. It's no big
Was
deal.
that all?
Yeah. No.
And the $1,000 wardrobe, that's just for show, not for go, right?
I mean, it kind of depends. I think a good pair of work boots will hold up on the dance floor in downtown Nashville and out literally walking through manure on the feed yard.
Yeah. I know some people who have paid a lot of money for boots and they've worn them for decades.
Yeah, that's kind of an investment piece. So that is the upside of the $1,000 wardrobe, is it should last you a very long time.
Should.
Yeah, it should.
So, you said you're now in social media strategy. How did you get into that working in the agriculture and beef and cattle industry?
Yeah, so we've been aware for a long time as an industry that we've not done a great job of leading our narrative, that we let a lot of conversations happen without our input. And so now there's kind of some negative connotations towards the agriculture industry, especially the cattle sector. And when I was in high school, I was approached by our local cattle women's group. They're a group of ranchers who work on classroom education. And they said, do you want to be our beef ambassador? I'm like, that sounds fun. That's a cool title. I'd love to.
That can open up so many bad statements there.
Yeah, exactly. But it was actually a really cool title where I got to travel around the county and go to classrooms and just teach people about beef. And then I didn't know that there was a state contest, and I won the state contest. And then I went on to a national contest, and I was a part of a 5-person national team. And we traveled around the country promoting beef through the Beef Checkoff, which is a producer-funded organization. And I was at the Boston Marathon. We went to the Penn State Farm Show. We did a barbecue cook-off in Connecticut. We went to Boilermaker in New York. We did a lot of beef promotion, especially on the East Coast. And I really loved those connections because I joke. The best part about agriculture is that everybody is your audience because everybody eats. And the worst part about agriculture is everybody is your audience because everybody eats. And very similar with beef, it's a very polarizing item. People love it or they think that you're ruining the world. And so both of those kinds of conversations I always found fun to engage in. So when I went to school at Colorado State, I kind of wanted to keep that promotional and educational piece. So I was kind of always on social media. And then I had an equine marketing business that I kind of learned more about how to really leverage social media. And then when I got to Five Rivers and noticed that they didn't have a presence at all, I thought, what an opportunity to have such a standing behind me and such a brand to follow that could really have some really great conversations. And we have. It's been really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was at Auburn working on my master's, they have a pretty big agriculture department. And one of the coolest things that they had there was they had the meat lab where agriculture students were the ones evaluating the meat and everything. And then it was certified. And then they sold it for like pennies on the dollar of what retail is on campus.
Yeah. And that's one of the really cool things about agriculture is that the colleges, I feel like, have such a fun way because it's food. Like everybody needs it. It's not, marketing or communications where you kind of have to get out into the world to practice it. I mean, you can practice producing and growing and selling food all the time.
There was even an episode about King of the Hill on it.
Really?
Yeah, there Bobby goes and become into food grading and he becomes like the whole expert at grading beef all the way up to like state championships.
That's awesome. In college, I was also on the meat judging team, so I should know that.
Well,
I don't know why I didn't.
it's a different it tells your age, I guess, if you know King of the Hill.
I didn't watch a ton of TV growing up. I was busy with the horses and the cattle and the things, but
And
I'm
now
just
you and now you live on social media.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the irony of that now is that I'm very in tune with all the TikTok trends and the LinkedIn hot takes.
We'll get to those later.
Awesome.
So, as a social media strategist in the beef industry of all places, most of my audience thinks of project management in terms of, oh, well, it's IT, it's building software, or you're in the other animal, which is construction. How does managing a social media campaign and a talent pipeline for cattle and feeding operations, how does that work like a project for you?
Yeah. It's kind of cool because when we created our social media presence, I said we need to have some intention to this. And so we built kind of what we call our three-prong approach, and that kind of helps me build a framework for designing all of these projects. So every Monday we do Meet Our People Monday. And so I am
I see what you
either,
did there.
yeah, exactly. um, which ironically, it's actually not MEAT, it's still just meat, but I probably missed an opportunity there to really capitalize on it.
There's always
Um,
time to change and
yeah,
pivot.
yeah, we can pivot always. So we're introducing an employee, fun facts about them, and when we have our interns for the summer, it's a lot of introducing our interns and their colleges.
Well, that's
And
got to
then
be
on
fun.
it's so fun. We love having our interns. We have 15 to 30 every summer. And they're such a fun mix. We do a intern retreat with them and they're so entertaining and it makes me so glad that I'm not in college anymore. And then our other prong is education. So every Thursday we share a Five Rivers fact. And the reason it's Thursday is because everyone loves to share a fact on Fridays. So we said we'll beat everybody to the punch and we'll post ours on Thursdays. And so that's anything from Five Rivers specifically what we do, the greater agriculture industry, beef and how it plays into a healthy diet. So education. And then the third prong was kind of brand building. So if we ever want to pivot to sell merchandise or we want to sell our own beef product or we want to make this a brand that people recognize. So kind of brand recognition and building was the third part of it. So I'm most of my days are kind of structured around building and scheduling and coordinating with people. And then I also generate pretty much all of our content myself. So coordinating trips to the Texas Panhandle or Idaho or Eastern Colorado to go to our locations and get people and get video content and get pictures of cows, which I always do well. Look up facts, research them, work with our risk management team, see if there's something fun financially we can share. So it's just me, which, as people know, can be kind of fun and kind of hard when you aren't having to drive an entire team to please do the thing that I asked you to do. But it's also really hard when it's you saying, Kim, why didn't you do the thing that we needed to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I learned that one kind of the hard way too of when you go solo, when you go to be a solo enterprise, I always say that your boss is a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah, and man, she can be unorganized sometimes too.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing, but yet you sometimes don't want to admit that, yeah, I got over my skis a little bit there, or, hey, that was a great idea in my head, but nobody else thought it was.
Oh, 100%. I always say my most researched, well thought out posts and videos perform
Hmm.
the worst, and my throw it at the wall and see what happens posts are the ones that always do the best. It's just
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I remember when I first started posting on LinkedIn, I just wrote something out in 20 minutes in first post and it did pretty well. Then it took me 6 months to get another post to do better than that. And it's like, I've had some crazy posts. The one that I thought would hit really good was I compared the Fast and Furious franchise to project management and how it really is a well structured team. And I broke it out and the whole detail of how each person does this and project management fundamentals and everything. Nothing.
Man, that's so frustrating. And I get that. I'll spend hours editing a video and getting every transition on the beat, and I'll do voiceover and I'll find the right audio, and I get a few thousand views. And then I post a 3-second drone clip flying over the feed yard and I get 5 million. Like, what am
Yeah.
I doing?
And
It should all just be drone footage. It's so easy.
well, I'm a I'm an FAA one certified drone pilot. So that that goes into a whole nother world of, yeah, drone footage is great, but you've got to be able to fly it where you can and everything too.
Yeah, yeah. Luckily, I get to fly over our private facilities, but that was a big conversation. So back to agriculture, we had a massive drone that we were actually using for accounting and cattle counting and
Mhm.
measuring feed bunks, and kind of cool that I was supposed to get licensed for that, but they just let me fly my little drone that's about that big.
Yeah, your little off the shelf thing that
Yep.
going right back to that same principle. There's the commercial one is probably 5-10 grand and yours off the shelf is probably $20.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm like, this is not the investment that I wanted it to be, but I mean, that's life. Sometimes the big investment doesn't pay off and the throw it at the wall and see what sticks ends up being really, really lucrative.
We call those lessons learned in project management. So, your bio says that you make the content that's impossible to scroll past. What's your secret to engaging in a world of 15-second videos and fleeting attention spans?
Yeah. It's tough. And I always say if there was a recipe to going viral, I would be a millionaire. So you never really know. It all depends on connecting with the audience. Every Five Rivers fact starts with "Did you know?" So trying to find something that's interesting that people don't know and knowing which audience I'm talking to. Am I trying to talk to people outside of the agriculture bubble? Am I trying to talk to people in the agriculture bubble who will want to share it with their audiences? So kind of targeting who I'm talking to that day is really important. And then just finding ways to be professional but trendy, which is really hard on platforms like TikTok and Instagram Reels, is finding ways to put a more professional spin on the really fun, trendy things, which it definitely pushes my creativity to the limit sometimes because I told them from day one, this is always going to be professional. We're not going to have employees dancing. We're not going to do anything ridiculous.
No bull
Um,
riding?
no, no, back to project management. I don't need a single employee breaking a leg trying to ride a cow and try to explain that lost time to anybody. So
Well,
last thing we
if
need
you
is
got the
corporate.
views, it might be that
Yeah,
ROI that you need, right?
yeah, exactly. Be like, listen,
National exposure.
I get that we're down a pen rider now, but we got 5 million views. So, I mean, come on.
So you hit on something that I want to back up to there about targeting your audience and in the agriculture industry and out of it because, you know, project management is no different with I joke that, we were joking beforehand and I say this all the time about this show that if you want to learn how to pass the PMP, that's not what I'm about. That's not what my show's about. I'm about bringing on the experts and the real world people. How do you bridge that gap between connecting the people that like me who I go to my store to buy beef and I couldn't even tell you the difference between the cuts of steak to the people who are in the industry who will argue over the marbling of a cut of meat.
Yeah, we've seen a huge, which is both exciting and kind of scary, this huge shift in people who really want to know the nitty-gritty details of where their food comes from. And that's an opportunity. Like I said, our audience is everybody who eats. So knowing who you're talking to, but more importantly, what questions they ask. And I hosted about 100 tours a year when I was out at the feed yard in operations and learning to hear what is the question that's being asked. And I've learned this a lot through all my kind of ag education channels is a lot of times if someone asks you, are there antibiotics in this beef, for example, which I can go on a long spiel about. There are never any antibiotics in any beef. If we, if there were traces, we'd get in trouble and we have withdrawal periods. But what they're really asking is the food that I'm buying safe? And so learning how to answer those underlying questions. And then when they have a follow up and say, okay, well, what about antibiotics? I can really answer that and dig into why there's not antibiotics in beef. Um, but knowing the underlying root questions, people want to know that their food is safe. They want to know why they're spending money on it, why they're spending more money, less money, why the value of things are different. Should they be worried about spending more on organic, or are they still okay feeding their family conventional, run of the mill food you can get at Walmart? And the answer is yes, it's all nutritious and you're fine. But knowing what those underlying questions are, and it takes hearing a lot of questions to learn what the root of those questions are. And it's just digging down of why are they asking that until you get to the heart of it, which is under kind of a lot of layers of detail sometimes, but sometimes throwing a ton of info at the wall and hoping that they can catch it all isn't the best approach. It's best to work from the base down to the details.
Yeah, and the root cause analysis is a big tool in project management of how do you get to the actual problem because sometimes, we say a stakeholder will come with a good idea fairy and it's our job to translate is that really what you're asking for or are you asking for something else? And you kind of hit on a point there that since I have an expert in this industry on, I want to kind of drill down a little bit more of there's a lot of talk of like the farm to table and where your food comes from and things like that. And I've heard a lot of experts in air quotes tell me, the food at the grocery store is crap and then you need to buy from the farmer's market or from the farmer. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about what the difference is between what I buy at Walmart or Kroger versus if I go to the farmer's market or I buy from some of those websites that advertise farm fresh food?
Yeah. The big takeaway is that's lazy marketing. If they have to bash the grocery store to sell their more expensive local product, it's just lazy marketing. The second layer is it all comes down to preference. If you want to know the person who handled that vegetable or that piece of meat from birth to it going into your hands, that's great. But the food at the grocery store is safe. You could argue that it's technically more safe sometimes. Sometimes it's more sustainably and ethically produced because it is produced at scale a lot of the time. But I don't want anybody to be afraid of any food. As long as it is USDA inspected, as long as it is, not out of date, as long as you're not allergic to it, as long as it, looks and smells fine, it's still good food. It all boils down to the story that people are resonating with. My story, when I go to the grocery store and I buy beef, because that's where I get all of my beef as well, I don't have some secret little side market that I'm acquiring it. I look for
You don't
price.
just go outside the office and pick up and go like point to a cow and say, "Yeah, I need 3 pounds of beef here."
Give me that one. No, and we do try to make that an offer to some of our employees, mainly for a price point. If you're producing it, you should be able to buy it. But it's not we don't have the secret side stash of beef that we're all accessing. We're all going to Costco and Sam's Club and Walmart and Kroger, King Soopers to get our beef. And I know that it's safe because it was USDA inspected. A lot of it came from our feedlot by chance. But your food is safe. And the farm to table story is great for people who really want to feel connected and really understand the entire process. But people telling you that the food at the grocery store is not good for you, is not nutritious, is going to harm you, are just lying back on lazy marketing and scare tactics, and it's stupidity. Honestly. But if
Now,
you prefer to buy it from them, that's great. I have no problem with where you want to get your beef, as long as you understand that you are buying a story and a marketing campaign and not necessarily a better product.
wow, that's the first time I've heard that kind of honesty.
That's the upside to my job. I do get to be pretty honest. It gives me some leniency there.
So, now I do have international listeners. Are you aware of like the equivalent of USDA and the inspection process in the US and other parts of the world?
I'm not sure what it would be. I know that in the UK, they have a pretty strict, they import a lot of beef, and so they actually import a different tier of beef. They have to be raised a certain way to adhere to certain export standards. I'm not super familiar with a ton of international food safety campaigns. I know that we're spoiled here in the US, so we have really safe, affordable food. We spend less per capita on our grocery bill than anywhere in the world, but I'm not 100% sure what they would be in other countries. Sorry.
No problem. I mean, I just ask that only because, like I said, we have listeners in other countries, and I try and be aware of that when I ask questions that we don't just focus. We're not the dumb Americans that focus everything on us.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I'm not familiar. I know our export standards and what we send to other countries, but I'm not sure what all of their grocery store and domestically raised standards are.
Do the export standards coincide with domestic, or are they different?
They tend to be more strict, mainly because they have the opportunity to be, and also because of the 2003 mad cow scare. That changed a lot of our trade agreements, and basically some of the youngest, highest quality, um, most unconventionally raised cattle are eligible for export to those countries because they've placed that standard on their domestic products, and so they expect that from imported products as well.
Interesting. So around the world, they're getting better beef than we are.
They better better and different quality, I think would be um this is something I could probably drill down into for hours because this was my old job. I managed the beef export program at the feedlot that I was at. I always say we take all the technology we spent the last 50 years developing and we kind of throw it out the window for those cattle. They aren't allowed to receive any added hormones. They aren't allowed, they typically have some type of tracking on them from birth. So it's just different. And those products are available here domestically. You're just going to pay more for them, the same that you're going to pay more for them in another country.
Well, I think this is a great place to pause for me to plug the Patreon account that I have, where I put exclusive interviews that are bonus content with guests like Kim, where for $5 a month, every guest that I have on, you're going to get about 20 minutes of bonus content where we're not just talking about things in generality. We're going to focus on actionable tips based off of my guest's expertise. Kim might be giving us some strategies for social media and how to how to make that viral video that you're trying to get, but no promises.
No promises. I can only give some suggestions.
So with that, go ahead and like and subscribe on the Patreon, and links are down below. There's also a $1 subscription platform for or tier for if you just like what I'm doing and want to support the show and help me keep the lights on, pay for all the services that I've got going, and that also helps me with getting guests by explaining I have an engaged audience that's willing to pay a little bit of money to let me know that they're interested in what I'm doing. So back to the show here. So we were let's shift gears a little bit and talk about you made a LinkedIn post fairly recently that got my attention because it's a ongoing debate not just in your industry but in all industries. And yours specifically was talking about degrees in the agricultural system and your frustration with that. Care to elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. It's a conversation we've had, and I will say this is universal to pretty much every
Mhm.
university I go to, and it sounds like it's across a lot of different industries as well. It's not just agriculture, but we've had this conversation because I know a lot of people who've got masters and PhDs. So I want to preface this by saying that I don't have any issue with higher education. I don't have any issue with somebody getting a master's or a PhD. But I think that our university system has created this kind of vicious cycle. I think that they're turning out undergraduate students who don't have experience yet, which is fine. We don't expect them to, but they maybe don't really know what they want to do, or they haven't found their home in the industry yet. So they go back in to get a master's degree. And the goal of that master's degree that they've been told is that they'll have more bargaining space in the industry, that they can be paid more and make more of an impact. And when that isn't necessarily the reality, when they complete their master's, a lot of them will then go into a PhD program with hoping for more of the same. And then kind of the cycle continues that they don't know where they're going to plug this PhD because they're very invested in their degree now. And they aren't walking out the door and getting a six-figure job because they still don't have any applied industry experience. And a lot of those people then get turned back into academia and become teachers, which is great. But we're also to a point where a lot of our tenured, experienced professors who held roles in the industry outside of teaching, who did really hands on research projects at the beginning, who formulated great industry relationships, have now are exiting. They're either retiring or going into the private sector, and their roles are being replaced by these PhD candidates and PhD graduates who don't have the real world application. They don't have industry connection. And a lot of them have never set foot on a farm or a feedlot or a ranch to see how their theories are applied in practice. And I think that then the undergraduates who learn under those are kind of getting the short end of the stick, and it's sort of this rinse repeat cycle that we're getting, which is a disservice to our undergraduates. And it also makes conducting research harder because these PhD candidates who are then pitching us ideas, we have to go in and retrofit all of these ideas to fit the real world, or we have to turn them down and say, that's not going to fit this system because that's a very great theory,
Mhm.
but the practice isn't there.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of points there. Like when I got my MBA, part of the application process was you had to have, I think it was 10 years of professional experience before they would accept you. And I actually commented on your post that once I was wrapping up my master's, I was having a conversation with my advisor about getting a PhD, and he point blank asked me, "What do you plan to do with it?" And then I kind of explained where my thought process was, and he's like, "Don't waste your money, don't waste your time. Just take your master's and go." And when you start talking about, I've had these conversations with a lot of people about degrees and education, and it's really nice when you've got somebody with the master's and PhD and all these academic credentials teaching, but when they can't say, I learned this through experience, I learned this through, but I know the theory behind it, and you're teaching that to somebody who's living that industry, it falls short because you're just telling someone what you think you know rather than what you actually know.
Yeah. And a great example, and how I realized this was wider than I thought. I thought maybe it was just animal science, but it was much wider. We have a young woman here who just completed her master's in ag economics. She's on our ag risk team, and she's incredibly intelligent. She comes from an ag background, so she brought a ton of experience to the table. And she was talking to me about some of the projects that some of her cohorts had pitched, and one of them was putting solar panels over crops. And she's like,
That makes no sense.
the crops need the sun to grow. And so it's just like that's a funny example, but it's kind of that applied applied loss because in theory, as you're working through all of these things, they sound great. And obviously that's a very dramatic example.
Mhm.
But this practice, like we had someone pitch a manure recycling project to us, which is huge. It's one of the things that we haven't really figured out how to do anything besides turn it into fertilizer. And he said, well, if you just go out and scrape the pens every day, we're like,
No.
we have hundreds of pens. And how much diesel that would cost just to clean the pens would completely negate the entire benefit of the manure study. And so it's things like that that, yeah, you have to ask those questions, but you can start to see that disconnect. Like that proposal shouldn't have even got as far as us. If there was a PhD candidate who wanted to propose it, someone in that pipeline should have said, that's probably not going to work. Let's look at how we can retrofit this a little bit more.
Yeah, I use this example all the time. I worked for the VA and I was a Six Sigma instructor, and I would go in and help teams kickstart their projects and help them with when they were struggling. And I walked into one project, it was a kickoff meeting, and they were telling me about how they were going to increase something, some metric. And I was like, okay, great. Show me how. And and I said, show me your future state, because that's the first step is current state and future state. And then they show me their future state, and I look at them and I say, all right, who's planning to lobby Congress for this law to be changed? Who's planning to reach out to the Senate to get this regulation changed? And how are we getting around HIPAA for this? And they just all looked at me and said, well, we're supposed to be improving the process and making this Six Sigma 99% efficient, right? It's like, no, the process needs, if we're at 70% efficiency, getting it to 75% is the best option, because there are certain constraints that we can't legally change.
Yeah, we live in a very real world, and there are real world parameters.
And going back to your manure example, it sounds great in theory to scrape stalls every day, but are you taking into account that the average farm has how many stalls?
Yeah, I mean, we have hundreds of pens
Yeah.
just at one location.
And how much labor is that to scrape those to scrape those once a day? Just one time, never mind do that repeatedly and then collect it. And you start doing the downstream effect of the math of this. I can promise you that you're better off just hiring a full-time person to scrape pens all day to keep them clean, rather than trying to recycle it based off of the ROI of that one person. Yeah. So real world versus practical world. It's always entertaining.
Yeah, and you need the theory to push the boundaries of the practical world for sure, but there's a disconnect that's continuing, I think, to widen as these wise professors who've pitched an idea like this before or it's failed before are there to be a voice of reason, which you will lose in attrition no matter what, but when they're being replaced by people who've never set foot outside into the real world and who already understand those parameters, there's going to be a pretty big gap for a while.
Yeah. It's kind of like the running joke in the military that when a lieutenant walks up to you and says, well, Sergeant, in my experience, and a lieutenant just got there and has never done anything,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, it's entertaining to hear that stuff, because you just look at them and go, do you have a clue?
Yeah. And there are great projects out there, and I don't want that to be the takeaway that there's not important things happening, but there are sometimes that it's almost laughable that you're like, man, I I don't know that shiny degree is going to carry the weight out here that you think it does because I have a, feed truck driver who's been doing this for 15 years who knows
Mhm.
more about how this works than you do, and that's a hard sell for me to pay you more than him when he's been doing this for 15 years.
Yeah, you've got the guy or girl who's been doing it for 15 years, who has a high school diploma, and you've got your master's degree person coming in saying, well, I'm going to change the world. Well, are you, or are you just going to give me a bunch of dumb ideas in theory because you don't talk to that truck driver over there whose wealth of knowledge he's forgotten more about what this industry is than you'll ever learn.
100%. And my growing up, my dad owned a commercial construction company, so I was kind of one foot in each of these fun industries, agriculture and construction. And I met a bunch of guys at CSU in one of my accounting classes who were studying to graduate into construction management. And I asked my dad, I was like, why don't you do intern programs with that? He said, I've got a guy who can hang and put up and frame a house faster than those guys can, and I can pay him a little more to manage the project, and he's going to bring so much more experience and so much more knowledge. He said, those guys are going to take 20 years to learn what he knows. And it's more valuable for me to pull guys up who've been doing this for longer into management roles than to bring in a fresh new face who wants to walk in and tell them how to do their job.
Yeah, that's the ongoing joke in project management because construction, you ask any PM who's been doing this for any amount of time, and they will always tell you there are two fields in project management. There's construction and everything else. Because construction PMs, they are a total different breed, and they're typically the people that come up from the trades, become a contractor, and then start managing projects because there's so much involved in managing any construction project that you can't learn in a book. You've got to learn it through building.
Yeah. And that was like, I mean, not to get off in the weeds on construction, but that was always my dad's claim to fame. He said, we have guys who have computer programs who put together these bids. He said, I still do all of them by hand. He said, it takes me about a week longer to get them a bid, but I underbid guys by often $1 million because I catch the mistakes that the computer systems are missing and I can hand calculate all this stuff. And he said, I typically bid under what most guys are pitching and I deliver what I bid because I've already accounted for every nail and every 2x4 on that project.
Yeah, that opens up a whole AI Pandora's box that I don't know that we want to touch today.
Yeah, I don't know that that's my industry's forte. We're just
Yeah.
barely kind of starting to squeak into what AI can do for us, but yeah, it's that's a whole other conversation.
So, on your form that you filled out for me, you mentioned you almost cried in an interview.
This
Care
interview
to,
for this
care to
job.
share that story?
Yeah. So I was in kind of a customer service role at a cattle breed association, which is a lot of data management and a lot of teaching ranchers how to use a computer. Like your mouse, what's that? The thing that when you move it, it moves the thing on the computer screen. Like that was the conversation I was having a lot of the time.
Did you ever have
And
to talk to them about the broken cup holder on the old computers?
Um, but I I liked that job. I learned a lot at that job, but I was ready for something different. And a friend called me and asked if I had interest in working for Five Rivers. I did. I scheduled an interview, and my first interview went well with one. The other one was a little bit combative, but once I kind of explained my experience, he was great. And I said, "Okay, your second round interview is going to be at the corporate office in Greeley." And I said, okay, that's great. I will see you guys there. And I walk in, and it is the president, the COO, the general manager of the location that was hiring me, the head of cattle purchasing, and then the vice president of cattle purchasing, all for JBS, which is like the world's largest meat
Well, yeah,
conglomerate.
yeah, they're big here where I live.
Yeah, pretty much everybody's heard of them, even if you aren't in the beef industry. So I walk into this boardroom with all of these, and not to be too cavalier about this, but like all these very established middle-aged men. I was like, oh, okay, a little off on one foot, but not the first time I'd been in that situation. And they were nice, and I answered a lot of questions. It was a little mix of like fluffy and honest and just trying to tell them what they wanted to hear. And one of the cattle buyers, Steve Williams, who I'm friends with today, goes, listen, that is great and all that you want to be in the agriculture industry and maybe you see yourself. He said, how do I know you're going to be in this job 5 years from now? And I don't know why. That just really made me so mad. I was like, you jerk. And I told him, and I got choked up. I don't think that they knew that I almost cried, but I got kind of choked up. And I was like, I don't know. I can't tell you that. And anybody who can tell you that is lying to you. But I do know that this job checks a lot of boxes. It meets a lot of my skill sets. I've liked visiting with you guys. I like the idea of this job. But if you want me to lie to you and tell you that every single day when I put my feet on the floor, I'm going to want to come to this job, that's a lie. Okay. And looking back, we ended up, our companies went separate ways, and I had to argue with him in the same capacity a lot. So I think he regretted hiring someone with a backbone. Um, the interview wrapped up not long after that, and they said that they'd call me, and I got out to the car and I just started crying finally. I'd been kind of holding it back. And I called my friend who'd recommended me for the job, and I'm like, John, I'm so sorry. I completely flopped. It was a horrible recommendation. I hope they don't hold it against you. And he goes, it's okay. I'm sure it wasn't that bad. And like, no, it was that bad. Like I yelled at Steve, and it was yell or cry, and I picked yell. Um, and I think it was either on the way home or first thing the next morning they called and offered me the job. So I was like, well, maybe it didn't go quite as bad as I thought, and I've been here 8 years now. But man, I was this close to crying, and I couldn't cry in front of all of those like really big figurehead guys in this industry. I was like, the last thing they're going to do is hire a girl who cries in the interview. Come on.
A lot of Stetsons, a lot of boots, a lot of denim.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of years.
Yeah,
I like all of
yeah.
them have been in their roles like 20 years. So yeah, yeah, it was
I
it was intimidating.
I
And
had a
looking back now, I'm
similar
like, it's funny that those guys intimidated me.
I had a similar experience in one of my first interviews for a project management role. I got asked a very basic technical question and I didn't know the answer, so I just kind of reasoned it out. And this was with a contracting agency, so my recruiter reaches out to me after the interview and she's like, "Oh, how'd it go?" I was like, "Oh, I did horrible. There's no way they're calling me back. There's no way they're interested. I was so dumb." And she's like, "Well, they called me and said you did great." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." They're like, "Yeah, you didn't seem to know a lot of
That's yeah,
stuff, but you did good on the interview and you reasoned out your answers fairly well, even though they knew you didn't know the answer." So,
yeah. And that's I tell people that all the time. I'm like, your hard knowledge means a lot less to me than your personality, because I can teach you just about anything on the feed yard or for the company. There are a lot of things I can teach you, and you need to show me those in your interview.
yep, you can't teach someone how to go out and be willing to work an 8-hour day in the sun and then, oh, by the way, it's busy season, so now you're working 12-hour days and we're lucky if it's only 12. We don't know when we're going to end, and you've got to be giving, we'll say 80% towards the end of the day because you can't give 100% all day.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite college student questions to kind of do a little bit of a grit gauge, is I always ask them like, tell me about your absolute worst day on a job or in school. And you can learn a lot by someone by what they think is their worst day. Because one kid did like a 20-hour shift at the stockyards, putting cattle away. And I think he got like an hour of sleep in his truck and then had to go to his other job. And it was hard. And then another girl was basically like, somebody yelled at me. It's like, but that's really
Yeah,
what I'm looking for your hardest day. I get that it wasn't nice, but if that's the hardest thing you've been through, this might be kind of a tough industry for you.
yeah. I being in the military, being deployed, doing all that, I'd have to look at you and say, which day?
Yeah. Here's a buffet. Pick whichever one
Yeah,
sounds the
yeah.
best to you.
So now is the part where we get into the personalized question that I've crafted for you. So you work in social media. If you had to create a video trend that accurately captures the chaos of a typical day at the feed yard, what would the trend be called? And what viral dance will you be performing to explain it?
Dance. Oh, I'd kind of have to take a spin on the. It was at that moment they knew they'd messed up, and like you get the foreshadowing. I think that you could do that all day long. Just
Yeah.
it be the moment and then the things that led up to it, and then the moment and then the things that led up to it. Because there are some days that are boring, and there are some days it feels like you're putting fires out all day. There are some days that you're like, oh man, everything is clicking along exactly as it's supposed to. And then there are some days that you're like, if the building could just fall down too, that'd be great. Just kind of
Yep.
add one more thing to the list.
Just put me out of my
Um,
misery.
yeah, just if the building could fall down just so I don't have to come in tomorrow, that would be great. But I love that trend, so I think something along those lines of the flash forward and then all the foreshadowing that came before. Because it is always something new and something crazy, and mistakes that you didn't think you were dumb enough to make, you make. Things you didn't know cattle were capable of doing, cattle do. Um,
It's
things that people do that you're shocked that they made that choice. It's always fun.
Yeah, I'm constantly asking my kids, was that a good decision?
Like, no, we're a kid. We're not supposed to make good decisions yet. We got to learn
Well,
how to make bad ones
I'm
first.
I'm working on that with mine. But you're You telling that story made me instantly think of, I can't remember what brand of cat food it is, but they had the Dear Kitten videos where it's got an older cat and they'll impart wisdom like the humans will only bring out the food twice a day, so be prepared.
Yes. Yeah, I have a 1 year old, so right now it's kind of just a rhetorical question of was that a good idea when he like scorpions onto the gravel driveway? Like, was running downhill on gravel a great idea? No.
Yeah, mine are 7 and 8, so
Okay, yeah, so they're at like peak poor decision. Well, I'm not going to say peak because I think 16 is probably peak poor decision making, but they're on the uphill trend.
I don't know. We make a lot of dumb decisions at 18 when we leave the house.
That's true too.
You know, and then don't get me started on 21.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I guess maybe girls 16 is peak poor decision making. I feel like guys may be a little bit on a further line out that way.
We make dumb decisions even in our 40s.
Same,
You know,
same.
there's no monopoly on making dumb decisions.
Yeah, that's true. Back to my point, I do see adults make choices. So I'm like, what did you think the outcome was going to be? Me making choices. And I'm like, what did I think the outcome was going to be here?
Yeah, yeah. Like you start a screening interview and the person shows up in a tank top and ripped shorts, and you're like, that's a choice to show up today.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you saw my LinkedIn post about when an employer asks for a headshot, what you do and don't send, which I
Oh,
thought would have been logical. And a lot of people wanted to rip me for screening. I'm like, no, they are hired. We're just putting together a booklet so that when they get there, people know who they are.
hmm,
And some of the pictures the girls choose to send, I'm like, that's the one you're going with for your employer? And someone said, is it only a girl issue? Guys probably have the same problem. I said, my worst issue with guys is that it's blurry and old.
well, and
Girls send me pictures. I'm like, I don't know that a bunch of guys you don't know yet in a professional capacity need to see that one.
and when you start talking in your industry, especially guys, they tend to be in the cattle ranching, in the agriculture industry for a while, or just starting out, and they all have the same stock photo of them in a hat, a flannel shirt, jeans, boots, maybe a lasso or on a horse or something just to make them
Yeah.
look even more authentic.
Yeah, I've always joked I could just like scrub their faces in and out of the exact same pose, and you could have our
Yeah,
entire executive team.
exactly. Yeah. And we won't even get into the whole topic of gender in that industry because that's a whole nother episode of
Oh
two
yeah.
or three episodes just going into that world.
Yeah, once my friend and I are trying to get together kind of a women in ranching, getting a leg up, getting your foot in the door program. So maybe once I have that going, I'll have another project that you can interview me about.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you back. It's one of those things that one of the reasons I reached out to you specifically is I'm trying to bring a more diverse audience, or more diverse group of people to my audience. I have access to some people that work in the agriculture industry that are dudes, that are farmers, that are ranchers, but I wanted a different take because their take and your take are going to be a little bit different. And I didn't know until I started talking to you that you were the social media person too.
Yeah, yeah. I get to tell our story, which is fun. But yeah, and again, back to the point about the women. I mean, we complain all the time in agriculture that we don't have, new blood coming in and that the older ranchers are kind of falling out. And I always say people are knocking on the door, we're just at the wrong door. Giving a chance to people who weren't born and raised in our industry is vital to our existence. And so that's kind of a fun conversation I get to have with all of our general managers now is I get that they weren't born on a ranch, but most of the guys born on a ranch are going back to the ranch. So you might have to take a chance on this person. So sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't, your well is not the same that it used to be 20 years ago. And you've got to be willing to teach, going back to that whole approach of people, you've got to teach someone how to do the basics. But guess what? You get to teach them how you want them to do the basics, not bring all their bad habits from their family ranch to your ranch and hope that they know what they're doing.
Back to it's so easy to teach the hard technical stuff that we do every day. That stuff's so easy to teach. By the time that you've given your 100th shot, you will be a pro. But I can't teach someone how to show up here on time every day. I can't teach someone how to get along with a team. I can't teach someone how to be humble, how to have humility. But if you've got those, I can teach you how to do everything else.
Well, Kim, I think we could talk for hours, but that's a good place to end it. So I'll turn the floor over to you to plug whatever you want to plug and tell the audience where they can find you and your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. All things Five Rivers on all platforms. It's Five Rivers Cattle Feeding on Facebook and LinkedIn. It's 5R Cattle on Instagram and TikTok. We post a lot of educational stuff like I've talked about on there. And then you can follow me, Kim Rounds, on pretty much every platform. And it's underscore K underscore D underscore R on TikTok and Instagram. But I think you can find me if you look up my name. But those are kind of the biggest things I've got going on now. I'm working on getting into some speaking and doing some panelist type stuff in the ag sector, but it's not all off the ground yet, so nothing to pitch quite yet.
Well, we'll have to come bring you back when you do. And I'll have links to all of her social, as many of her socials as I can fit in the show notes.
Awesome, thank you.
So, so please, make sure that you like, subscribe, follow the show if you enjoy what I'm doing. And also don't forget about the Patreon. I'm trying to make sure that I provide value to you for your money. So it's not just a hand me $5 a month just because you think I'm interesting. So with that, I'll end the show like I always do. May all your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. For Kim Rounds, I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the disgruntled PM.